Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Engraving Workshop. In today's video, I'm going to be building a display cabinet for the University of South Florida that looks like this. That's coming up next here at the Engraving Workshop. So like most supervisor-approved projects, she gave me very little guidance, which in a way is probably a good thing. She bought this acrylic display case off of Amazon and simply told me, build me a display cabinet. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. If you're interested in this display case, I'll leave a link in the video description below. The first thing I need to do is assemble it, and lucky for me, this is probably going to be the easiest part of the entire project. It simply snaps together and there's an access door on the back for inserting whatever you want to display. Now that it's assembled, I can start taking some measurements. This display case will be used in either portrait or landscape orientation, but I confirmed with the supervisor that it will be displayed in a portrait mode. So with that decision made, I can start designing the cabinet around it. The display case measures 13 inches wide by 13 inches deep by 17.5 inches tall. To build the cabinet, I'm starting with some big box store 2x4s. Over at the joiner, I'll flatten one face and one edge because there's one thing I know for sure, it's that big box lumber is almost never straight. Off camera, I rough cut the boards down to about 50 inches at the miter saw. Then over at the planer, I'll mill the opposite face before heading to the table saw to clean up the opposite edge. That leaves me with straight square stock that's ready to build with. While at the table saw, I'll go ahead and rip down the boards down to 1.5 wide strips. Back at the miter saw, I'll cut 4 pieces to 13 3/8 inches and 4 pieces to 10 3/8 inches. This will make up the top and bottom frames of the cabinet. Over at the outfeed table, I'll pre-drill and countersink both ends of the 4 longer frame pieces. Then using Titebond 2 glue and 2.5 inch screws, I'll fasten everything together to create the top and bottom frame. Before moving on, I'll do a quick test fit to make sure the display case fits perfectly inside the frame. Once I'm happy with that, I'll repeat the exact same process for the bottom frame. With both frames complete, it's back to the miter saw to cut the 4 vertical side pieces to 45 inches. Combined with the top and bottom frames, that'll give the cabinet an overall height of 48 inches. Before attaching the side pieces, I'll remove the temporary screws from the bottom and top frames. Those screws did their job while the glue cured, but now I need those same locations to fasten the sides. Just like before, I'll pre-drill and countersink each hole, apply some Titebond 2 glue, and secure everything together with 2.5-inch screws. And just like that, the main frame of the display cabinet is complete. Next, I'll grab my DIY track saw and start breaking down some 1/2-inch MDF for the cabinet panels. I'll rough cut 4 side panels to about 14 inches wide. Then over at the table saw, I'll rip 2 of them down to their final width of 13 5/16 of an inch. At the miter saw, I'll cut 2 pieces to a finished length of 48 inches, and I'll leave my stop block set for now. Back at the table saw, I'll rip the remaining 2 panels to 14 5/16 of an inch wide before cutting those to the same 48-inch length. Over at the outfeed table, I can finally start assembling the cabinet. I'll attach the side panels to the frame using 1 1/4-inch brad nails, installing the 2 narrow panels first, followed by the 2 wider panels. With the side panels in place, it's time to build the base trim. Using 3/4-inch MDF, I'll rip some strips to 4 inches wide. At the miter saw, I'll cut a 45-degree miter on one end of the first piece. Then I'll hold it against the cabinet, mark the opposite end for a perfect fit, and cut the second miter. Once I'm happy with the fit, I'll attach it with wood glue and 1 1/4-inch brad nails. From there, it's just a matter of repeating the same process around the entire base. Next, I'll move on to the top banding. It'll be built the same way, except this time I'll rip the 3/4-inch MDF down to 3 inches wide, making it slightly narrower than the base trim. To make installation a little easier, I'll flip the cabinet upside down and install the top banding the same way, mitered corners, glue, and brad nails. With the top and bottom trim complete, I can start fabricating the corner trim. I'll use 1/2-inch MDF for this, mainly to add a little depth and detail, or at least that's what I'm telling myself. At the table saw, I'll rip 8 strips to 2.5 inches wide, leaving them a little long for now. Then with the blade tilted to 45 degrees, I'll cut a bevel along one edge of each strip. Setting the fence to 2 inches gives me the profile I'm after. Over at the outfeed table, I'll glue the trim pieces together using painter's tape as temporary clamps until I can lock everything in place with a few 1 1/4-inch brad nails. Once the glue is dried, I can cut the trim pieces to their final length. If you've been following along at home, they should end up at 41 inches long. That's the cabinet height of 48 inches minus the 4-inch base trim and the 3-inch top trim. I'll square one end at the miter saw, then using my stop block set at 41 inches to cut the remaining pieces. With a nice snug fit, I'll attach them to each corner using nothing more than 1 1/4-inch brad nails. After repeating that for all 4 corners, the cabinet is finally starting to take shape. The last step before moving on is adding a decorative trim piece around the top that will support the display case. For that, I'll use 3/4 inch MDF and rip it into 2.5 inch wide strips. Over at the router table, I'll chuck up a Roman ogee bit and route a profile along one edge of the 2.5 inch wide top trim. Once that profile is cut, I'll head over to the miter saw and cut a 45-degree miter on one end. Then I'll lay the trim on top of the cabinet so I can mark the location for the second miter. I want this trim to sit around the outside perimeter of the cabinet's inner frame so it'll act as a stop and keep the display case securely in place. Once I have the first piece cut to length, I can set up a stop block at the miter saw and batch out the remaining 3 pieces. The finished dimensions measured from long point to long point is 18 3/8 inches. To assemble the trim, I'm using a little trick I use quite often. I'll apply wood glue to the joint, then add a couple of drops of CA glue and a shot of activator, and the CA glue acts like a clamp, holding the miter tight while the wood glue dries. Once the trim is dry, I'll center it on top of the cabinet, leaving a 1 1/4 inch overhang on all 4 sides. Then fasten it in place with 1 1/4 inch brad nails. You'll probably notice that I've already filled all the brad nail holes with wood filler since this cabinet is getting painted. With that, the cabinet build is officially complete, and I can turn my attention to the finish. I'll start by sanding the entire cabinet with my random orbital sander, beginning with 120 grit sandpaper and working my way up to 220 grit. I'll spare you the full sanding montage, but you still have to share at least a little of the pain. I almost forgot, the supervisor requested LED lighting inside the cabinet. So before I start painting, I need to drill a 1 1/4 inch access hole in the lower back corner for the power cord. Using my hole saw, I always like to start the cut in reverse. It helps score the surface and reduces tear out before drilling normally. Once the hole is complete, I'll switch to some 80 grit sandpaper and ease both the inside and outside edges. I couldn't get my trim router inside the cabinet, and on the outside the base trim was in the way. Otherwise, I would have added a small roundover with the router. Hindsight being 20/20, I probably should have moved the hole a little further away from the baseboard. For the finish, I'll be using a satin latex paint from the big box store. The cool part is, I simply told them I needed the official University of South Florida green and gold, and they were able to pull up the exact color match. So kudos to Home Depot for making that easy. I'll paint all of the panels green first, using painter's tape to mask off the trim. Once that dries, I'll reverse the tape lines and paint all the trim gold. After the paint dried, I still felt like the cabinet was missing something. So I had the supervisor send me the USF logo as a JPEG. I converted it into a light burn file and laser engraved it onto a piece of 1/8 inch MDF that I'd already painted gold. I'm not going to dive too deep into the laser engraving process here because I already made a dedicated video on my MechPal laser engraver. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that video or any of the others. Needless to say, the supervisor was pretty impressed with the engraved logo. And let's just say, that kind of thing tends to come with a few special perks for you-know-who. The only problem was, I wasn't crazy about the square shape of the logo blank. To fix that, I designed a 3D printed 6-inch circle to use as a routing template. I attached it to the back of the logo with double-sided tape. Trimmed away the excess at the scroll saw, and then used a pattern bit at the router table to cut it into a perfect circle. To mount the logo on the front of the cabinet, I'll use my laser level to center it and level it. Then I'll add a little wood glue along with a few drops of CA glue and activator to hold it in place while the wood glue dries. The final step is installing the LED strip lights around the inside of the top frame. I'd say this one turned out pretty bullish, if you know what I mean. And more importantly, it earned the supervisor's approval. I'd call that a win. Well, that's going to wrap up the video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please leave it a like. And also, please share the video. It really helps out the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you can be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all you existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you give this channel. Now I'll leave links in the video description below to any tools and equipment that I might have used on this build. And as always, thanks for spending some time with me in the workshop today. I'm Rick with the Engraving Workshop. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.